Okay, so good evening. Good evening to all of you. I'm extremely happy to be here because of this crowd who are really interested in this topic, because I always encourage a dialogue, and especially a dialogue that is open towards different fields. Because since this topic is really vast, I'm just only trying to share a few ideas here and there, throw a few thoughts of maybe some philosophers, just to grapple with the complexity of this entire topic, which I have taken it the way Father has put it, existence of God and creation. If you put it into a proposition, you take the key terms. If you write it down, existence of God and creation. Normally, in philosophy we will look at the formulation of the statement. That's very basic, because that's where the analysis begins. Because you want to articulate something, you have to first of all base yourself on the existing concepts, and then the point of departure should be the analysis of the concepts, to see whether the concepts really stand against something real, substantial. So obviously words can mislead us. That's where we are towards the first part of the contemporary philosophical tradition, especially with Ludwig Wittgenstein and the logical positivists who started off the revolution of language philosophy of the modern, maybe the late 19th and the early 20th centuries, where they practically turned philosophy upside down. Obviously coming from the medieval times, the great medieval masters, the scholastic masters such as Thomas Aquinas, Bonaventure, Albert the Great, and people like that, explaining and trying to grapple with the question of God in the field of metaphysics was not very palatable for a crowd of people living after the scientific revolution. And now that's going to be something controversial. It's difficult to talk about. But then let me tell you, this is where I want to start. This is where I want to begin. It's not a new question. It's a very old question. Existence of God. The place where I want to begin is, I want to begin from the Bible. Do you have the same question in the Bible? And there are many places where you find that question in the Bible. But the Bible presupposes that you believe. It presupposes that you believe in God, because it's not written to somebody who is not a believer. So if an unbeliever reads the Bible, definitely he will find that presupposition, which obviously will lead to a greater crisis as we go on reading the Bible, because so many things that are described in the Bible will fall against that basic fundamental intellectual option, whether to believe or not to believe. So I would like to just begin with St. Paul in the first chapter of his letter to the Romans. This is just one place I just want to begin with, because I just want to place myself on the Word of God as we begin. So Paul, in the Epistle to the Romans, chapter 1, from verses 20 to 23, I'll just read it for you. For the invisible things of Him from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even His eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse. Because that when they knew God, they glorified Him not as God, neither were thankful, but became vain in their imaginations, and their foolish heart was darkened. Professing themselves to be wise, they became fools. And I'm just focusing on that. You can see that there is always a paradox in philosophy, starting off with Socrates himself, right? Sometimes the more we know, the more we realize that we don't know. That's where Socrates realized, and Socrates was considered as the wisest man at that time, because not because of the amount that he knew, but rather by knowing, he realized, started to shed away all prejudices, and he became, in a way, infantile in his pursuit of knowledge, as if, unprejudiced, unfixated in any thought. And it's a kind of an openness that he had, allowing so many ideas to flow into him, but not getting carried away by any of those things. In a way, a non-dogmatic approach to his experience. Now, looking at this entire topic, existence of God, I'm taking out these three words, actually, to put it this way. What is existence? Three questions I'm just trying to talk about. What is existence? What is meant by God, right? And then what is creation? We'll just focus on those three things, because when we put this into a sentence, the existence of God and creation. What is existence? What do we mean by God? And then what's creation? Now, these are loaded questions in philosophy. Existence definitely will be one of the core questions in philosophy, right? Now, the question of existence is non-objectifiable, right? It's not like looking at an object, right? When you look at an object, you don't see, or it doesn't occur to you that it is existing, because we are fundamentally based on our senses. So what we see is actually the sense dimension of the object. But if you allow your mind, give your mind time, the mind will eventually start abstracting the essence out of that object, provided you give it sufficient time. You engage with that object sufficiently, right? Now, normally we do this in the classroom. We show a pen, right? Okay. Now, when you look at this phone, what is the most fundamental statement you can make of this phone? Tell me. Any object for that matter, right? Okay. What can you tell me about this phone? Shall we just try a few? Communication equipment. Okay, it's the brand of it. Okay. A solid object. A smartphone. Yeah. A camera. Welcome. Professor Anton Meeman has come. Yeah. So you all are, actually what you are doing is you are describing this object, right? Tell me the most fundamental statement in relation to this object, upon which every other statement is based. Again, a description. Tell me the most fundamental statement that you can make of this object. Yeah, you're now speaking in the level of abstraction. That's good. Yeah, it's a creation. But still, yeah, it's somewhat closer. But then no, go on. What is the most fundamental statement you can make of this or any object for that matter? What is the most fundamental statement that you can make of this object? Yeah, you see the object. That's your experience of it. But still, these are descriptive, right? Something tangible. Yeah. That's how you construct this, right? So you have the object, the phone. But then you go on describing within the framework of the subject and the object, you are just describing, one part of it. But then that's not what I'm asking. I'm asking, reduce it to the most fundamental statement that you can think of this object. Even that is at the level of, electronics or something, where you're using about energy and power. Yeah, you're referring to the material cause of it. Yeah, the material cause of it. Actually, just to cut it short, the fact that this is the most fundamental statement that you can make of this object. That it is. I don't know whether it means anything to you. The phone is. What do you mean by is? That it exists. How can you talk about something that is not existing? The fact that you can talk about that is, in a way to say, is a hint of its existence. If something is not existing, how can you talk about it? Even imagination, right? It's a serious statement. You're talking about something, you might say it's dragons and mermaids and whatever, but then those are mental constructions based on things that you've already seen, synthesized maybe. But the fact that talk about something that is not existing, I'm listening to you. Tell me. Say something that is non-existing. Can you describe? That's funny when you say there is no God. Like Anthony Flew is one of the greatest atheists of the 70s and 80s, right? Now when you say God is not, the problem is even to deny and to negate, you have to accept the fact that He is. Right? That's something very basic and fundamental, no? Even to deny that God exists, because you have to go through the fact that God is. Because there is an intellectual or an epistemological impossibility of negation before affirmation. We'll go into the logical structure of our existence. Our knowledge is fundamentally based on positive affirmations, which you call by that's what you mean by experiences. All what comes as negative, in a way, are consequential, right? So, just scratching the surface of this, the question of existence, right? Because when we say existence of God, right? Let us not dig deep into. There are so many things that we can talk under this topic. But then there's something that I wanted to, just begin with, to say that it's complex. This problem of existence is the fundamental platform upon which that we talk, right? Our language is possible because of that. Our concepts and thoughts operate on that. Right? So existence is non-objectifiable. Right? It is something that once our sense experiences solidifies into synthetic experiences of maybe you may call intellectual experiences or abstract experiences. Right? So now, what is existence? It's very difficult to describe that. It's fundamentally an experience. There's no object that you can pinpoint at, to describe this. Maybe there's one way of looking at it, because so many philosophers thought that this is the core of all the questions that you find in philosophy. The most fundamental, the mother question of philosophy is the problem of existence, or the problem of being. Right? So, going with that, I've just, even to talk about this famous philosopher René Descartes, one of the father of the modern philosophy, René Descartes, a French philosopher, who said that cogito ergo sum, that I think, therefore I am. Right? That's where the epistemological slant comes into philosophy, and where the mind comes into the center, or with the mind the subject comes to the center, and the cosmos and God and everything else goes down to the periphery. Right? That's where we are today. We think that mind is in the center of the universe. Right? Obviously, the pre-Copernican universe was an Aristotelian universe. Right? And for Aristotle, the center of the universe, or he never knew the universe as the way we know it. But then the limited universe that he knew, in the center was the world, or the planet. Right? So it was a geocentric model. And that was based on the way he observed. And then now we find after the Copernican revolution, definitely between the geocentric and the heliocentric model was a theocentric model of the universe, where some of the medieval mystics thought the center has to be God. Right? So you find these process, but now where are we? Now today's science or today's cosmology might say there's no center to the universe. With the Big Bang, it's expanding. Now, from where you are observing, the observer becomes the center. Right? Maybe the Einsteinian world will say, it's relative, where you are. You are the center of the universe. Because that's from where you are observing the universe. It seems like everything is turning around me. That's a very strange experience when you look at the universe. But scientists are looking out there to come up with a structure, and the structure that we are trying to find is basically governed or conditioned by the structure of our mind. There's something inescapable. That's why René Descartes thought of, going backwards. How far can I go backwards, unlearning or releasing or letting go of all my concepts? Where will I stop in the end? It's like a meditation. Cartesian meditations are that. When Descartes started off, he thought, let me first of all eliminate all the concepts out of my mind. See, what will be the thought that will remain in my mind that I cannot doubt? So he started doubting everything. And he used doubt, you call it a methodological doubt, a skepticism, as a means of finding absolute certitude. What is that concept or the thing in this universe that I can believe without doubting? So he went on. It was a long meditation. And then when he went on backwards, releasing idea after idea, he came to the point where he was left with himself. When he came right down to the core, it was something that he could not doubt anymore, was the fact that myself, I am thinking. That of course I cannot doubt, he thought. I think. So he made that premise the foundation of his entire thinking, right? So now, why did I bring this up? This is where a kind of a revolution, you call it the Copernican revolution, is a cosmological revolution. But then the Cartesian revolution is an intellectual revolution, where everything became subjective, right? So what is important now is whether you can know for sure without depending on any external maybe affirmations, whether you can know something by yourself, depend not going by any statements or proofs. It's like knowing by oneself. If you know it by yourself, most people might say, then I can believe. But I will not believe anything that the other people are saying, maybe with proof even. But what is proof? Even proof is given, right? Somebody else is doing that. Maybe it might be a scientist, but then you believe the scientist. Why? He's a scientist. He's qualified. You believe in his qualification, and his authority. That's actually accepting something on the basis of authority. But then you are not a scientist. You have to depend on the scientist's knowledge. So there's an element of belief there. Right? You're not doing the experiment by yourself. You are borrowing somebody else's conviction. So this is where it comes to a point where nothing can be believed. It's a dangerous world. Why? Everything is relative now. So when you begin with this, it went to such an extent where in the middle of the modern period of philosophy, there were two camps battling it off, right? On one side, there were the rationalists. On the other side, there were the empiricists, right? Rationalism and empiricism. So the entire experience of knowledge, got to a tug of war, where some said, if it is to be proved, if it is to be accepted, it has to be rational. What is rational is real, on one side. And on the other side, there were the empirics. They said, if it is to be true and real, acceptable, I need to see it. I need to touch it. It must appeal to my five senses. Observability. Experimentable. You can experiment, you can touch it, you can handle it, then I'll believe it. It should be right there before my eyes. Otherwise, I'm not going to believe that. So these are the two camps battling it out. Right? On one side, the empiricists, on the other side, rationalists. Right? So Descartes was a rationalist. Obviously, you know why. He discovered the subjective side of. And people like David Hume, right? Hume started, it was another extreme where he simply said, if something is to be real, it has to be sensible. Sensation. Right? Only those things that are observable, quantifiable, I will believe. So it's even experiences are sequences of sense knowledge. Various sequences of sense knowledge, experiences, even experience, and emotions. Right? So he went to the other extreme of it. And then came maybe the master of, or the father of contemporary philosophy, where it started off with Immanuel Kant, right? The German philosopher who made an attempt to synthesize the two camps that were actually rifting, and they were tearing the intellectual history into two major camps, and then Kant made an effort to bring them together. And he said, no, you can't simply say only rational is real. No, there is a corporeal aspect to our knowledge. We have senses, because maybe you can call into mind what Aristotle said: nothing is in the intellect without first being in the senses. Because everything that comes to the intellect has to first go through the senses, right? So you can't negate that part of it. But then you are not supposed to stop there at the senses. You have to go through and let the abstraction take place. So Kant had both these elements, right? But then Kant told, there are these things that you cannot observe directly, but then you have to go through a very complex process called a transcendental process, to really come to know whether they really exist or not. What are those things? The question of the soul, the question of the cosmos, and the question of God. These three things are non-objectifiable, right? They're not things to be, just looked at and, say, okay, there's God. We'll put him under the microscope, you observe. You can't. Can you observe the cosmos as an object? Can you observe the cosmos as an object? It's so vast. When you look at the cosmos, you only see a tiny dot. You don't see the entire cosmos. It's a synthetic experience. It's an amalgamation of so many other parts, And look at the soul. What is the soul? Maybe it's an emergent experience. An emergent experience, which requires some fundamental experiences. First, you have to go through those fundamental experiences to arrive at this emergent state of reality or realization there's something called the soul. But then I can't pinpoint at that. Okay, you disintegrate, remove the 5 aggregates out of which the man is made. Like maybe if you read Lord Buddha's Katavattu Prakaranaya, you will see that kind of thing, where, or even you can refer to Milinda Panya, King Milinda and one of these Nagasena, that conversation, where say, is there somebody called the person? And he will go on, reducing part by part, removing to see whether the person is there. For an example, you take the car, but then you remove, what do you mean by a car? You remove part by part and see whether there will be something called the car remaining in the end. No, it's a total collection of so many things. So something like that, so Kant came to the middle point where he wanted to make us realize that these concepts should not be mixed up with other ordinary concepts. So existence of God is one among those concepts. Right? So that's just a little something to think about, from which I will just try to put a little end, but then just to talk about that, I gave you 3 questions. First of all, what is existence? That's what I was talking about basically. And what do you mean by God? Yeah, we'll keep it later, right? I will not go into that immediately. And then what is creation? It might be something, related to science, as most of us think that creation is. But then, let me tell you, the word creation should not be confused with the universe, right? Because if you look at the universe, creation is something greater than the universe, right? Because universe is, if you understand it that way, is just one aspect of creation. But then if you look at the existence itself, universe represents maybe one part of existence. There the entire gamut of existence, with all the limited scientific knowledge we have, we might not even know. But all what we are discovering every day, right, is a hidden dimension of this entire existence, right? So that's where I would just put a brief end, because there are others to talk about. So we will continue. If you have questions, we will continue as we go on.